start over. Okay, restart. As most of you were here last time, you understand that we're moving a little slower than some of my other workshops. And the idea is to give a little more practice time, and with the hope of people developing their concepts, if they have a concept, slowly along the way. But if you don't have a concept, it's okay, just hang in there, because you might come up with ideas. There's reasons you're here, as well as you can help other people. We're hoping to develop our grant writing community. So when someone has a need, or I know there's times where we're thinking that CARES funding is going to be coming down the line, and there's going to be more opportunities, and there's probably going to be more than I can do on my own. So if we can build up skills and also meet the needs. So it's really nice to hear your needs. And we've also invited YCC, because we're working on a Title III grant where we wanted to build their capacity for grant writing as well. So that's kind of the bigger picture. So today we're going to look at finding funding from local, state, and non-federal sources. Next week, we'll talk about federal sources, because I think that's like there's so many different ways and searches. And I think that's one thing all that we can do is spend a significant part of time on. I don't want to give you too much. So we're going to look at just the private and other sources of grant funding. Then I give some time to keep talking about your concept, keep refining it, not to stress if you don't have a concept, but just think about, oops, there's my cats. They don't like each other. One cat pretty much lives upstairs and one lives downstairs, and when they both want to be in the same territory, they're not happy. Anyway, after that, we're going to divide in groups and talk about your concept, and also look a little bit more specifically about funding sources. So you have some time with the group to look at it, look at some of those sources, look a little deeper, and then we're going to come back and share what funding sources we thought about for our concept, or maybe we have a need or see an upcoming need in a department or unit. And then the third will end like we did last time with pressing questions. So if you have pressing grant questions, it's the time just to ask it and answer it. Last time I was really happy. There's a lot of wealth knowledge in the group, and so we can kind of keep going with that. So any questions about that? Then I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to get started with looking at funding sources and how you find them. Okay, first to start off with, does anyone know what ORS or have experiences with ORS?
Sorry, ask that question again.
Does anyone have experiences with ORS, which is the Office for Research Services? Does anyone maybe can explain what it is?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa. So, Office of Research Services is kind of like the accounting side for the grant processes, as well as the contractual side. So they do the invoice and billings and what have you with the grant sponsor. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That is correct. They have the authority to submit grants. So because they do the contracting. So you might think, oh, I'm going to email this grant off, or I'm going to submit this grant via the OHA system or the Kamehameha Schools system, because they all have their own systems that you could fill it out and submit your own. But actually, you don't have the authority to submit a grant. ORS can submit a grant on our behalf. So not even Louis can submit a grant, or OKS to submit a grant. So that's why we have to route it in MyGrant first to get approvals from everybody at our campus in the line of authority for you. So you, your unit, and then the chancellor and the fiscal office has to sign off. But then it gets to ORS, and they're the ones that submit on our behalf. So it's just really important to know about that. And they have a lot of really great resources. And so I just want to point you to this page. I have finding funding that gives you, let me put it in the chat. Finding funding document that gives you the links to these different sites. So I know that's hard to write it down possibly, but those links are all there. So a couple of things just to note, resources that ORS has for you. They have this contracts and grants and contract certification program, and you can just Google their site for it. Again, this is on that Finding Funding, the name of it is, but I had never taken it, but I've heard it's really good as far as writing grants and grant management, because you need to know a little bit about grant management to write a grant. And also the things you need to include in budgets. So I had signed up in March and they canceled it because of, or for spring, but they canceled it because of COVID. And they haven't had one since, but I'm sure they're going to start doing them again. So that's another like systematic class that I would recommend that you take if you're interested in grant writing. They also have something really helpful. There's, if you go to, and again, this is on the Finding Funding worksheet. It's the last entry. So you don't have to worry about finding this, but if you go to apply and proposal development, or you could just search for ORS Grant Seekers Handbook. They have a handbook that's really helpful. It covers lots of information about writing a needs statement, goals and objectives, methods, dissemination. So basically getting the word out about what you did, evaluation, and lots of tips through and through. So like when I first started writing NSF grants before I was in this position, I leaned on this actually quite a bit. And they had actually come and done, people who did this came and did a training as well. But just know that's there for you. It's a good resource to use. So the other thing that ORS houses is these links on the right-hand side. You see this says quick links. So there's an institutional profile, and this is really important. This will solve a lot of back and forth questions for you if you end up applying for a grant, because it has everything that we need about our institution. So there's actually some text here. I have actually copied and pasted this text when we talk about the UH system. I haven't put the whole thing in. I usually edit it to be shorter or to my needs, but there's an overview about UH. Also, when we're applying, we're never applying as UH Maui College or Hawaii CC. We're applying as the University of Hawaii. So sometimes it seems like we are partnering with different campuses, which we are to write the grant, but we're actually all under the University of Hawaii. So when you put an address in for a grant, the address is here. Our authorized representative is Vasilis Sirmos. And sometimes you need other stuff like tax ID numbers or tax status, DUNS numbers. So when you're working with grants, you'll hear all these different codes and different things you need to say if we are or not. Are we Title III? Are we Title V? It's all here. So if you need that information and you see like all these many pages in a grant dedicated to obtaining a DUNS number or something like that, ORS has that for you. So you're just gonna skip over those pages. And anything you might need is on the ORS page on the institutional profile. So
Melissa, can I ask a quick question? Can
What?
you tell us what? Could you tell us what Title III and Title V are?
So Title III has to do with let me think. We're a Title III institution. It has to do with I believe being an Alaska Native Hawaiian serving institution. Usually in general, there's Title III for low income institutions. So we're a Native, and a PC. So we're actually also, so Title III is Alaska Native Hawaiian, and the Asian American Native American Pacific Islanders. So, and we're strengthening institutions program. So I believe the strengthening institutions has to do with income, like how many students are in financial aid eligible, low income eligible. But then there's also Alaska Native and Native Hawaiian, which there's Title III grants specific to that we write. There's also Title III programs specific to Asian American and Native American Pacific Islanders that we can write, we have written, but the thing is we can't get more than one of these programs. So we actually were awarded it, what we call an APC grant, but we couldn't get that in addition. But it's good for you to know, because if you're a minority serving institution, so like Chad, if you're writing NSF grants, you know, and you already know this, that we're minority serving institutions. Honestly, I forget what Title V is right now. I'll get back to you. Does anybody know here? I should know, but I forgot.
I can look it up.
Okay. You stumped me. I'm sure when someone says it, or when I look it up, it'll be like, oh yeah, that's what it is. But I forget. Google's my friend. Wikipedia too, as in grant writing. I tell people a lot of times I'm an expert in writing things that I know nothing about, because that's what I do. I learn quickly. So
Google says for government entities. So maybe it's just that general, possibly.
yeah, I'm curious now. That doesn't ring a bell, but I'll have it for you next week.
Hey guys, I got Title V of the Higher Education Act is a federally funded grant program created in 1988 to assist certain colleges, universities in improving their higher ed of Hispanic students in the US.
Thank you. We're not that. Good to know. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for your Google searching. So now we're going to look at searching, what they have for search. So ORAS has a lot of good search, and that's why I start here. We're talking about ORAS. Because this is going to be probably your best page to find to search for things as a starting point. They used to have this system called Pivot where we could put search things in grants and search across all types of private and federal and non-federal grants, but that was a lot of money, and I guess not a lot of people used it. I used it weekly, if not daily, so I'm pretty sad about that. It's been gone for a few years, but this is what we have. So grants.gov is federal. We're going to talk about federal funding next time. The Candid.org is a search engine for foundations and foundation information. So you can search for different things, like let's see, maybe digital library services. Maybe we want to add digital library services. So then we can look and see. And so I've looked at this a little bit. I don't use it a lot. I would say I'm lean heavily on the federal grants, but this tells you, it gets you familiar with like who's giving money away, because they have articles where foundations, like the Gates Foundation, Library of Congress. So then you start being aware of different foundations that are giving monies for these different programs. So that's a way to find national foundations. If we go to state and county government, so just like federal does this too, but a lot of branches of government gives grants away. And so it gives you ideas on the different departments that might have specific grants, like the Labor and Industrial Relations Department has grants, DLIR. They generally have like $25,000 grants. So I typically don't go after these smaller grants, but I think they're really good starting points for you, especially if you're starting to write grants. The thing with the DLIR is a lot of word of mouth, and a lot of these are going to be calling and finding out information. So it might be good to start with like a phone call. I think they have like a contact us. Start with some phone calls. Like I know DLIR has had agriculture, so their Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, so they've had like $25,000 grants for healthcare, for example, and they've had $25,000 grants for agriculture, labor, and workforce development. So I might start by calling like their local office or district offices of like Maui or Hilo, whatever is relative to you, to start asking, like, I have this workforce development. So you think about the department that aligns to your program if you're interested in getting a state grant. County the same way, County of Maui and County of Hawaii are here, and you can find these links. So here they actually give you links to their grant departments, which is nice. So here's a link to the county grant level funding for Hawaii County, and then we have Maui County here too. Which gives you links to the different grant programs that are county level. Again, county level grants, there's a lot of grants that are, I've seen like 10,000 or under 7,500 or under 12,000, maybe up to 20,000. But those are easier grants to obtain. So those are some of the state and county from the ORS website, and I'll show you some other things soon. They also have Hawaii non-federal here. And so there's different associations, foundations, and other resources in Hawaii that might give or make grants. Hawaii Community Foundation is a good one. They have links to the grants where the competitive grants are. What's others? So healthcare, like Kaiser Permanente, HMSA, give grants as well. So that's good to kind of know if you're thinking about like healthcare, those grants are there. I mean, the one thing about some of these like Kamehameha schools, Kaiser, HMSA, Hawaii Community Foundation, it's good to talk to people on campus to see what other funding they're seeking for that, because sometimes we have specific things. Like Kamehameha schools is more working with their district offices. So if you would want to do a Kamehameha schools, you might reach out to the district office and talk with them about it. And they fund various projects because they're really interested in community development, teacher development, because we have teacher shortages, healthcare shortages, and services that ultimately serve Native Hawaiian, our Native Hawaiian community. So just, it's good to check around within your institution to see if we're pursuing something else to not compete and have a organized approach to them. But they're still available, and I know people have gone straight to them, gotten grants to start projects in areas that they're interested in. And what else do we have? So they have links to mainland corporations and foundations. I think what happens with ORS is when people have a grant from one of these sources, they add it to their list. And so that's where some of this has come from. But it might just give you ideas on who to reach out to for different things. So I think of a good example. Oh, like for example, when the fitness center, when I first started in the grant writing position, our Maui Fit wanted exercise equipment. So we actually wrote grants to HMSA and Kaiser, and through that, and it wasn't just the exercise equipment, it was programming in relation to it. So they weren't interested, they wouldn't have given us just the machines. But if we did a programming to see the health benefits and the impact for students and impact on staying in school and persistence and having increase in belonging, they were willing to fund that. So sometimes you just think about, okay, what is my program and how does it align with the missions? So if you look at the funding sheets, I have some state examples that are not on here. Wait, I think there's something that I missed telling you about. Oh, here it is. There's the hands, Hawaii awards and notices. So this was on This is under state and county government with the ORS page, but the hands, it says you can search for a state. Now they added a few things to the ORS site before, since I've been here. So bidding opportunities is where you can search. And so they have everything open. And as you see, these aren't necessarily all grants. They're bidding things like Llamascape Park vent ramp repairs. I mean, that's not stuff we're going to be doing. But you could put in searches like RFP, which is this is a request for proposals. Some have RFPs, so then you have a better idea. So this is more of a grant to create a strategic plan for Department of Planning. And I was kind of playing this a little bit before. I don't think it's comprehensive because I know like there's OHA grants open and they don't come up here. So just know that there is this system where you could look for, it says you could look for state awards, I think state and county, but I'm not sure about the comprehensiveness of that because I would expect some things to come up that won't come up when I'm searching for it, but just know it's here. So these are all sources and tools you can use together. So some of the things I put on your worksheet, one is the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So OHA has some really good grants. So I encourage you to keep your eye on that if you're interested in grant opportunities. You can actually sign up. Would I explain what is the bidding page again? The bidding page, I'm going to go back to this, to ORS site. So I went to state and I went to this apply or search, and then state and county government. And then they have, this is new. I haven't seen this before on the ORS page. Doesn't mean it wasn't there, but this hands program to search for opportunities in the state. And they have a little video you can watch about it on their website. But basically, for grants, they say you can come here. So bidding can be, so they have goods and services and so forth, but they also have, if this is request for proposals for Victims of Crime Act, that would be something you're interested in. It has 16 pages. That's a lot of pages to go through. When I tried to like search things like for like a OHA grant that I know is open, I couldn't find it in here. So I have doubts about the comprehensiveness of this, what this is, but I know things come through bidding. Like for example, we have our, there's a WOIA for first, I'm trying to think what that is. It's our cleanup program comes through bidding. So bidding is like, they're saying it like you're going to bid for, or you're going to find a grant. So that's what it is. You might be able to search through these pages. You know, if you want to go through 16 pages, that would get you the most options. But when I start searching for things like, when I start searching for things, I don't know, I don't find what I would expect to find. So there's like construction and so forth that people bid as a contract, but also grants are in here. So basically, they're saying that notices come through here for the state, but I don't see everything that I would expect to see there. Does that kind of answer your questions?
Does it mean the grant has been awarded and they're just looking for a bidder to complete the project?
No, they put grants on there too. So either for like, they put, like I'm set up for the Maui County bidding and they put grants on it. Like they had grants sometimes for, I remember once there was a recycle program grant that was on it. But then they also put like our cleanup program that we apply for. So they put grants on it, but they also put things that contractors would bid on. So for like the county, and I'm thinking the state mirrors that they would just put, if there's an RFP that comes out, like DLIR might put something on there, but for like a grant proposal, but also they're putting stuff like construction and so forth on it. So OHA has some really good grants, grant opportunities. So if you look on their page, you can also navigate this, that you can sign up for notifications. So I do that. So connect with us. So you can put on the bottom of their page, you can put your email in, and then they'll email you when, like a monthly, weekly, or when grants come out. So for example, they have a COVID grant, and okay, it's coming out soon. March 1st, it's going to be open, and it's going to be due March 19th. So we know we can watch that if we have something that meets the criteria for supporting Native Hawaiian families and communities. Also, there's another Ohana community-based program coming soon. So that one opens March 1st. So OHA has some really good grants. They have every year they have this Ahui grant, which has to do with having events that benefit the Native Hawaiian community. So that comes out every year. Every 2 years, they have larger grants that cycle through. So that's another good thing to look for. And then they have in there like workforce development, education, community and land conservation type of grants. So good to look through OHA. I have on my sheet is the Tourism Association. I know that matched some of the things that were mentioned before. I looked at it. So with COVID, cut their 2020 grants by 50%, and they haven't offered an award this year, but I'm sure they'll be back offering grants in the future. But they have really good grants. They have one that protects our natural resources and land conservation. They have another one about promoting and perpetuating Hawaiian culture. They have another community-based tourism program for if we have ideas that has to do with tourism, like for example, that could have to do with our food innovation centers, right? To highlight our culinary or our food to table kinds of programs. And then they have community enrichment. So these grants are like 25,000 to 125,000. They're really good starter grants for some of the ideas we have. And there's also another state grant that wasn't on the page, but on the ORS, it's on my page that I gave to you, is the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation. They have funding for businesses, but they also have funding for, so if you look through their programs, they have like the Innovate Hawaii, which can give funding for, I believe, developing manufacturing, which fits in some of the things we do as far as food manufacturing. They have money for businesses, different types of grants. You can look through and see the different types of grants they have. So it's another good source. County, so we had been here before about the county, so Office of Economic Development. And again, this is on the worksheet that I gave you on the handouts, county grant examples. So the grants are available. Generally, there's like, they're not open right now, but there's usually a window that you can apply for, and they have all the information and resources there. And those tend to be a little bit smaller grants, like 10,000, under around 10,000, give or take. But you can find out the information. So they don't have ones open for currently, but the kind of like a half a year rolling deadline. Generally, it's been. So that is the count. Yeah, and so that's kind of the idea of it's so the local grants and the non-federal grants take a little bit more searching, a little bit more calling and talking to people. But there's a lot of great resources out there, and they can be really good when you're starting out. They're not as competitive as a federal grant. So those are some of my places that I recommend. And I'm gonna stop sharing. Just say, is there any questions about that?
Melissa, I have a question. As we're looking at the OHA website, we did see some grants with the short turnaround. So I saw like 3 weeks or whatever. So is that enough time to even go through the process that UH would have to go through?
Yeah, so my grant, best case scenario, like if it's just one institution, 1 week is really good to have it routing. If you have multi institutions, like 2 weeks is good, but you can push it through in a couple days if you need to, but it stresses everybody out. So, but to route it in my grant, you don't need your proposal or the narrative part that you're writing to be to complete. To route it in my grant, you need your budget complete because your budget cannot change. Like the fiscal office is reviewing your budget. So you would want like an Excel spreadsheet and your bottom line, some kind of budget narrative. And those things can't change when you're routing in my grant. And then some kind of project summary. On it. So like your key people can't change, your title can't change, your dates can't change, but your final like narrative can change. So you can route it before you're completely done. But just if you change your budget, if you change your dates, if you change your key personnel, you're gonna have to recall it and route it again. That might help a lot of people with those short turnarounds. Yes, they're very short turnaround. I know I just was asked to write one that's due Friday. And I'm just like, okay, but so you can push it through, but that's the problem with grants. I mean, they're generally, if you're not ready with the concept, and that's why I'm kind of pushing this, thinking through your concept, your ideas, and want to build along the way to as far as your concept, how you demonstrate needs and your objectives and your activities. You're just meeting on Fridays because when a grant comes, you pretty much have to be ready to apply. So like the 3-week turnaround is pretty tight. There's some like large federal grants that give a 4-week turnaround, and it's craziness to get those done in time. Okay, what was that one website right before the business one? The Hawaii.
It was the HTDC one, I think.
DC.
HTDC.
Oh, yeah, there's Hawaiian Technology Development. Is the business one. The one that I talked about before that, I think the Hawaiian
HTA.
Yeah, HTA, the Hawaii Tourism Authority. So I looked at the website, like they used to have it every year, and they're pretty good grants. Like I think some were like 25,000, some like 100, over 100,000. But they aren't offering competition this year, and they said they reduced by 50% because I'm sure it has to relate to what's going on right with tourism. So, but eventually they'll be back, and no one has gone for those grants. I probably should have. I kind of push them here and there when I pay attention to when they're due. I put it out there for people to apply to them. But I don't know anybody who's applied to them. But I think we should. When they come back on, I think they'd be great. And that's kind of talking about BIT a little bit. So give me one of your grant examples or concept ideas. Let's just use it for example.
I'll go if no one goes.
I'm saying, hi, Brooke. What was that?
Hi. I'll go if no one goes. I mean, mine is kind of fun, so I don't want to take away from one that's more like serious.
Brooke, just go ahead. It's just an example.
Okay. I guess making or building Mo'olelo into comic books for
So building Mo'olelo into comic books, right?
Yes.
Okay. So say, and I think this is excellent. I was really excited about that project when you said it. So say we are going to apply to something for OHA education. How would we frame that?
Okay.
Anybody can jump in. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, isn't there always a lack of Hawaiian material in general, though? So would we frame it as a need for building more Hawaiian resources, and like not just like older Hawaiian resources, but like I guess, what is that, contemporary? I guess would that work?
Yeah, so on one hand, it's like perpetuating Hawaiian culture and traditional stories through modern resources, right, into the next generation. So I think that's a general concept. But if you had a grant to increase education outcomes for Native Hawaiian students with OHA, how might we reframe that? And anybody can jump in with ideas, but how might we reframe that idea?
I would say literacy, educational literacy, or down that road.
Yeah, so it'd be increasing literacy skills for our children in a culturally relevant modern method that they can relate to, right? So that's how we might reframe it for if we're doing education or to meet education needs. Like for Kamehameha or something that had to do with preserving culture, I think it's great how it is, but think about, let's see, where else could we go? What if we were going to apply to, so like the Hawaiian Tourism Association, the Hawaiian culture, like preserving Hawaiian culture, that might be a good way, to use it as is, right? But if we look at, let's see, what's another possible slant on it?
I see technology too, because if the outcome of the comic book will be digitized or whatnot, so, because I keep hearing the word contemporary, so yeah.
Yeah, that's really, so that would be a different way that we could look at it. Like we could look at even like, yeah, digital resources. I mean, there's community grants that we could go for that would just support that as is. But maybe what if we were looking at serving at-risk youth? How many grant permission to serve at-risk youth? How might you reframe that concept?
It's like building or reconnecting to their culture, or just some kind of, way to, I guess a gateway to probably education, a gateway to, a betterment of their future. So,
and maybe teaching Hawaiian values.
Yeah.
And through the stories, right? So it's just a thought of like, how do you reframe your concept? Because sometimes people get really picky about what grant they want to apply for. Like, that's not exactly what I want. That's not what I want. You have to think about it. Like you need to reframe things for different funders for what they're looking for. I think another example I've used in past workshops is health center. They really wanted to give flu shots to the community. That was like really important to them, right? But that might not align with the mission of our college as strongly, right? So maybe reframing it as is practice for the nurses in training, the program participants to get the skills they need by giving flu shots to the community. Also, it benefits our campus community because there's less lost days of student time and less absences by staff by giving our college communities, vaccinations, right? So I mean, it's just all about kind of reframing for your sponsor and also realizing that sometimes you're not going to find funding that's going to fund 100% of your project. Sometimes there's pieces that you break up. So for example, when I was building the Stimulate project for the Upper Bound program, Kaikina Okala funded the curriculum development component of it, right? But the Upper Bound funded the teachers as part of the regular programming. So we started building and then eventually got an NSF grant. So we started an Upper Bound. So we had different pieces of it putting to the whole puzzle together. And sometimes your projects are going to be like that. You might get funding for like professional development or teacher training. You might get funding to implement what you're doing. You might get funding to study the research aspects of it. So think about it sometimes a little bit more fluidly. It is just one grant going to do everything for you to be matched perfectly. You have to be a little bit flexible and see what it is and try to work it and reframe it. But usually there's a reframe if it's kind of close that you can do to sell it to the funders. So any questions or thoughts about that?
Thank you. That was good.
We have 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna now break you into groups, maybe partners. Is that too intensive for you? Handle partners or groups of 3?
Can I ask a question first? Based on your experience, what is it like requirements or qualification requirement to submit the application, the grant application, or to write the application, such as you have to be a certain education level, or you have to be associated with a nonprofit organization, or associated with the school, or I wanted to see what is it? Is there like certain background qualifications that required?
Depends on the grant. Some grants will require the applicant to be from an institution of higher education or a nonprofit or both are eligible. So you have to read the eligibility requirements. Like OHA says it has to be community-based partner or community-based organization or nonprofit, but I think they allow the University of Hawaii to apply to their grants. So that's something like is just good. You need to verify and confirm that we're eligible. So I think it depends on the grant. I think all of us, if we're connected to a campus, we would qualify for the state and local ones. You'd have to talk to whoever's in your line of supervision. I think about what they prefer, like different units prefer different things. Some people like to be the lead. So sometimes it might be like your vice chancellor or dean might be the lead of the project or the chancellor. So you just need to kind of check in with your line of supervision. But some of these smaller grants, like they'll be okay with people being the lead on it. So there's just no clear-cut answer to that, but it just depends. You have to talk and ask with whoever you report to see what their preference is. But I think, for these, as far as qualifying, I think that anybody on this who's here to qualify as to lead these projects is just what your unit or department prefers. Yes,
Thank you.
and Giga is a great resource. So thank you for adding that. Okay, so I'm putting small groups, and what I want you to do is to talk through your concept. If you don't have a concept, that's okay. You can just say there's things that might interest you, and then maybe brainstorm with each other about what might be good funding sources from non-federal that we talked about today as a starting point for your grant. And if you don't have a concept, just help everybody that's there. So maybe I'll put into 4 groups. So it'll be maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. I'll see how the group is how groups are doing, and then bring everybody back. Welcome back. More people coming. Let's see where I can see them. Unless we lost them. Might have lost them. I can't see. Oh no, we didn't. That's interesting. I just learned something about Zoom. I can't see everybody on the side panel. So I think this is everybody. Well, welcome back. Are there any interesting conversations you had or funding sources that you learned about for your concept or idea? Or just other interesting things you want to share? I know there's lots of other conversations happening too.
Well, for my project with trying to create curriculum for kindergarten teachers, I was thinking about what we've been talking about, and I thought, well, maybe I'll look at HNU Photonics, which is a company here on the island that does that does very scientific work. And they said, oh, well, we, on their webpage, they said we would support this grant. And so I went to the grants site, and I'm now looking at it, trying to see if it might fit what my needs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Chad, for sharing. That's something I didn't mention, but sometimes you can think about businesses that might align with what you're trying to do and look at their website pages. I've done that before, probably more so from the programmatic side when I was trying to develop different educational components and STEM-based education. I think I was looking at Boeing because they have offices here. I was looking at, I'm trying to think some of the other ones. Johnson Controls, they actually have a really good education department and outreach. Maybe they don't give grants, but they're really good partners for STEM education. But yeah, thank you, Chad, for sharing that. Other things.
Chad had brought up that it might be good for me to contact the funding source directly to see how to improve my chances of wording something. For me, I'm just looking for a little bit of money, under 10 grand, to buy some equipment for our training center here in Hilo. And I was thinking private foundations, very small organizations might be the best source. And there's some local ones here. And like Winnie had brought up like HMSA or Kaiser or something like that too. But calling them and chatting with them to see how I can better word it to suit their needs, to give my proposal a better chance.
Yeah, definitely. It's really great ideas to talk with the sponsors, see what they want. This is kind of what we're talking about, reframing it, but just even starting that conversation about what are they looking for, and then kind of fitting your project into that and finding out even what they've funded before. Like sometimes on their websites they'll say they're funded projects, but maybe not small ones. I mean, these smaller grants, all of them. I think if you can develop a relationship with whoever the funder is, when they buy in, you pretty much got the grant, right? I've had faculty come to me and said, I know somebody at the county level who really wants to fund this project, right? So it's like they got it before they even write it. So yes, definitely. Other interesting things or funding sources? Okay. Any pressing questions or grant questions in general? Guess I'll move forward with like any any kind of programmatic or grant writing questions you might have as you're looking for things to meet your needs or things that you were curious about as we were talking, anything. Like last time, there were some good questions and a lot of good answers and knowledge base from this group.
So you folks I keep hearing you folks refer to like the county of Maui. So most counties would have some kind of like a development office or something like that.
Yeah, so we have the Maui County Economic Development
Okay, yeah.
that gives grants, but on there's grant resources. I'm going to drop this into link. This is from the ORS page, or drop this into chat, sorry. There's for Hawaii County. And usually the county opportunities are small, right? But if you're looking for something smaller, and I think, I mean, smaller sources are good funding, funding starts for if you're working on a project. So the example with the Project Stimulate that I talked about before with the different pieces building it out, like we had written an NSF grant before we had piloted the program, right? Do you think we got it? Because everything was just really conceptual. We didn't have any curriculum developed. We didn't have anything. We wrote about this whole model, but we didn't get it. So then we, like I said before, Kaikino Okala gave us some support in curriculum development, just small. But then I can have instructors working on developing the curriculum, and then Upper Bound implemented the curriculum. So basically it was, we split the instructors 50-50, because Upper Bound could only pay the teachers to teach, and Kaikino Okala could support this because it was culturally based and culturally relevant curriculum. And so we were able to use small sources of funding to pilot the project to really get an idea what it was so we could apply again. So sometimes smaller sources of funding can be a seed for you to expand if you have a bigger project in mind, to really get clear on what you're doing.
Hey, Lori, the other thing to know is that every time we reference Maui County's Office of Economic Development, on the Big Island, you guys don't have that, but you guys do have a department called Research and Development, R&D.
I found it. I was just Googling it now.
Yeah, so that's who would be the counterpart for economic development and grants and things like that for business.
Okay, thank you.
And again, all these things I think are really good to call and start communicating with them, and the idea of the cycle of when it comes up, what they're looking for, sell your project, make good relationships. So so they want you to fund you before you even submit it. That's the best scenario with the local sources. Any other pressing questions for today? Okay, well, next week, I'm going to go over federal funding and searching for federal funding. And I just encourage you, if you don't have a concept, it's okay. You don't need a concept per se, but if there's something you'd like to do, I'd like you to think about it like when you're driving, when you're, brushing your teeth in the morning, whenever you are, to start thinking a little bit more clearly about what it is. So next week, I'm going to have you write down your concept in like a sentence. And if you don't have a concept, just maybe write something that you would like funding for, something you see around the campus or your community that you think is a need, instead of a project, something you're passionate about. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Keep thinking about it. We're going to keep refining the concept as we go along. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
Next Friday, feel free to invite people. Like, I just want to keep this ongoing, like little mini lessons, conversations, and answering questions. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.